Welcome, friends, to the next Breath of Life conversation. We are in season 2. Can you believe this? I don't know if you have been following us with all of the episodes, but here we are, season 2, getting into it, and we're starting off so big, so big. I have with me Cristina Mendez, who is one of my soul sisters. We were in Soul Teachers together, and she's a badass Reiki master. She is an intuitive. She's a mom. She's a wife. She's all the things. And she's a healer. And we are here to talk about, you guessed it, sex. We're going to talk about sex. We're going to talk about sensuality. We're going to talk about love. We're going to talk about life. We're going to talk about all the things. How about that? How's that to start off 2022, right? So we're gonna go deep. If sex or sexuality is something that you're just not really comfortable, hopefully you'll stick with us. I encourage you to stick with us. I encourage you to really stick around and maybe learn some tips and tricks, maybe learn some things that you never knew about yourself, about your partners, about pleasure. I think one of the biggest tragedies in our country today is a very significant lack in sex education. And we do not give ourselves, we don't give our children, we don't give anyone a very good jumping off point when it comes to sex education. And Cristina and I have been really deep diving into this topic of self-pleasure and pleasure in general, pleasure within relationships, and what that means for our energy. Since we're both energetic healers, getting up into people's energy all the time, every day. This is a topic that's really like near and dear to our hearts and something that we've really been digging into. So without further ado, Cristina, how are you?
Oh, thank you, Abigail, so much for having me on here. I am so excited to be here and to talk to you about normalizing sex.
Amen. So when was like it when did it first like dawn on you like, oh my gosh, like I'm not comfortable or with sex, or I want to talk about sex more? Like, was it when you reached out to me and were like, hey, like maybe we could have a conversation about sex, or had you been thinking about it before?
I think I've always found the way that people feel about sexuality to be slightly askewed. Like I've always found like it very black and white and none and no gray, and that's where we lacked imagination in an area that requires so much creativity to really connect to our being's true purpose, because we are meant to be passionate and orgasmic beings. And I say normalize sexuality because I feel like for some people, it's very taboo, right? It's a very difficult topic to talk about. And my husband being one of them, like he's very, like, not to me behind closed doors, right? But that's how he was taught. Like, you could do whatever you wanted in the bedroom, consensually. However, it wasn't discussed in public, and and none of it was shown in any way, shape, or form in public either. And that is very much a societal thing. Like that's something that we grew up believing was correct, and that it wasn't meant to be shown or exposed in any way, shape, or form. And many people in the spiritual community feel comfortable with it being in that box still, and that's okay. And um everyone has to reach their level of commitment, but I've always found it to be very odd that like the body has to be so covered and not shown. Like I was very European about the idea that like free the nipples, they're just nipples, bro.
We all have them. So what's the big deal?
But I'm also a mom and I get it. I don't know that I will be okay inside with my daughter choosing to not wear a bra and wear a white tank top. And that's my conditioning, right? That I have to release and let go of. You know, she's not there yet, so it's okay. She can wear the tank top without a bra. And still, I still have a few years to get there. But I'm
Like
being honest, right?
the
Like,
scary, yeah, like the scariest part of being a parent, I would assume, is like that moment where your child not only discovers their own sexuality or their own sensuality, especially when it's a girl, right? But also when they want to start expressing that and not being hindered by that. And we know what our society is like, especially for girls and women, how much of a power that is and what a tool it is, but also how dangerous it is and how much danger it puts us in to be expressive and to be our authentic selves, if our authentic self, I can't speak today, um is shown in that way. Like I remember being like 8 when I was sexualized by other girls, like believe it or not.
oh
Like
wow.
I remember other girls my own age, like making me out to be a hoe, and I was like, I
Wow.
don't even understand what that, I don't understand what y'all's problem is. And literally having them say that, like, I couldn't possibly like this little white boy that lived down the hall from me in our apartments. And just feeling so like, I don't understand why you're doing this to me. Like, this is nobody that I am like it's nobody I enjoy. Like it was somebody I didn't have any sort of feelings towards, especially at 8. And yet I also remember that like I became, a very like very aware of my own like sensuality, my own pleasure when I was like 5 or 6. So like just very much like understanding who I am, what I enjoy, what I like starting to like realize that at such a young age. And I can't really like explain like what in and of itself like triggered that, but it was something that definitely made me feel apart. Because once that was kind of like the first step, like first I became like aware that I was like a being that understood pleasure and wanted pleasure and enjoyed things that like felt nice. And like even
Yeah.
to this day I like go around like in Target and I like touch things and I'm like, ew, no, 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 that shall not be on my skin. um and just like understanding myself, right, and my body, and then having women and girls like recognize, oh, it was weird. It felt like it was like it was like they knew that I had a sense of myself that they didn't yet have, and that was like a threat to them in some way because it would take something away from them, namely other, possible partners. It was weird. It was like this animalistic thing now that I think about it. And then it was men, then it was boys and men right after that I was like, now I'm feeling sexualized by you. um and so I am curious, have you ever experienced something like that?
So for me, I was a really late bloomer. So I looked like a little girl for a very long time, because of my physique, right? My daughter is going through something similar. Like she's the youngest in her class, and she's also the least developed. Like she's 8, but she's still wearing 6-year-old clothing, because she's just teeny tiny. And
She's so
so
tiny.
Yeah, she's really, really small. And I was like that too growing up. So I would say that my first experience was getting dressed as a girl with at my girlfriend's house to go out to a party or to when we were in high school. And she had a very young mother. She had her when she was 18. So she talked to us a lot about those things. And that was really the very first time because my house was not about those conversations. And even though I had older sisters that were 10 years older than me, they kind of really protected in that way. Like they kept me very much the safe little sister in that bubble of innocence. But when I did hit high school, that's kind of when it was like, oh, and was very uncomfortable wearing button down shirts. Like I stopped wearing V-necks and button downs because I didn't like that I couldn't see men's eyes. And I would tell them my name, but they weren't looking at my face. They were looking at my chest. And so it was really uncomfortable because that's also when I started to develop. Um, so I was at least, I had the discernment, right? Like to say, well, I'm just not going to wear that anymore. Like I just didn't wear those types of shirts. I wore, crew necks, shirts that just covered, and that took care of that for a while, right? And then you go into college and girls are competing for that kind of attention almost. And I thought it was really odd. Like it was always like, why would I want why would I want the attention in that manner? Like it was always very strange to me, probably because I grew up seeing it with my sister. My sisters, I had two sisters that were 9 and 10 years older than me. My oldest sister was a late bloomer, but when she bloomed, boy, did the floodgates open up. She had it all going on, and she was also 5'10".
Wow.
Yes, yes. So she had like the perfect pear-shaped body, but 5'10". And so a dress that would look perfectly fine on my other sister, who was 5'3", my 5'10" sister could not wear and not get in trouble, like
Mm,
not get herself in an uncomfortable situation at that age, because she wasn't aware. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
she just because she was too young. She was 15, 16, 17 years old. And like I remember my father stopping her one night and not letting her go out. So, and I saw this as a 6-year old, 7-year old, 8-year old kid, and I saw this going on, and where my father was like, you cannot leave the house dressed like that. She was like, why? Monica wore it last night, my sister. And she was like, you do not have her body.
Right.
And that just not, it was so challenging because that she couldn't see it. She didn't understand. She thought she was being punished.
Hmm.
And it wasn't that she was being punished, is that she didn't understand what came with looking that provocative at that age, going out in Miami.
Hmm.
At that time, like it was just looking for the wrong thing to happen. And my father wouldn't like, he just couldn't, he's like, no, I'll let you go, but you're not going like that, And it was so prevalent in my growing up that when I saw that in college, I was like, no, no, that's not for me. And so to a certain extent, then sexuality became this very conservative thing, right? Because you didn't want to flaunt it on the dance floor or on, because I saw what would happen. The girls would come crying to the dorm rooms and the things that would go on, and it was like, um, and not to say that I didn't dress sexy. I was just careful, and you shouldn't have to be, right? Like we
Right.
don't want to teach our children that they have to be careful with the way that they dress, because then there's consequences. And then to a certain extent, you put yourself in that situation by dressing that way, right? We'd like to erase that mentality of protecting our youth by making them afraid of their sexuality,
Hmm.
because that creates other problems then, because then what examples of sexuality do you have?
Hmm.
What you see on TV, pornography, and these pinup girls, the thank God Victoria's Secret changed their look to a certain extent and really started to
Mhm.
incorporate different shapes and bodies. But for my generation, at least, body shaming and having a certain physique was all that sexuality was really about.
Mm.
And
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And you mentioned that piece about not wanting to teach our children to fear their sexuality. Where do you think that even started? Like, I mean, you just described very perfectly what I think of as like almost, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe our viewers will be like, actually, I had more experience. I would say like our like both of our stories is very like, opposite of each other, of like one starting off very sexual very early on, very much understanding like, or thinking that I understood my sensuality, obviously, like now as an adult. I look back and I'm like, that was like, there's been an evolution here. And somebody who like was, not really not paying attention. That's the wrong way to phrase that. Not being aware of that, and really having a much like later, um, being much older and being like, oh, now this is coming to my mind and now I'm seeing it and now I'm having to make decisions about it.
yeah.
Um, and I am curious actually. So any viewers, like type in the comments, like I want to know, like, what was your experience? Like, were you like A or were you like B? Um,
And I'd like to preface by saying, like, because I think it's important to open up about this, and I do remember this vividly. It's not to say that I wasn't sexually curious at a young
mhm.
age, right? Like, I see my 4-year-old, and she dances towards the seatbelt on a regular basis. You know,
Like just knowing that something like feels good in her body.
Right. And so I would definitely say that I recall doing things like that as a kid. I don't know as young as my 4-year-olds, because I don't think I remember that far back, that kind
Sure.
of a detail, but I certainly remember as an adolescent, like I think it potentially happened maybe the first few times I went horseback riding,
Mhm.
and I was like, oh,
This is
there's something
different.
down there. Oh. And then I just got curious, because as
Mhm.
kids we're curious, and
Yeah.
you haven't lost that. Hopefully, there's still that innocence to it, but I didn't realize until I was older what that was,
Mhm.
because I hadn't gotten that hormonal click, I guess.
Yeah. 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 That makes complete sense. Where do you think the onus of that though is, like where do you think that the beginning of this like shaming of sexuality and sensuality and self pleasure or pleasure in general, where do you think that really began? Where do you feel like our global society decided, you know what, we're not going to do this, we're going to be more conservative, we're going to tend towards the um, closing off, being behind closed doors, teaching our children to fear what is incredibly natural, and teaching them that others are going to hurt them because of a way that they dress, for example.
I think that that's a gradual thing that starts to happen in society. There isn't a flip that gets switched, like it's a gradual thing. Like it starts with the small thing, like, oh, those sexual rituals are meant to be had behind closed doors, to then, because back in the day people didn't really dress promiscuously, right? Like they had lots and lots of layers to their clothing at one point, with all those corsets and the millions of things that they wore. So I feel like, the women's movement, where women then stopped wearing, they burned their corsets or whatever it was, and they moved into wearing more masculine clothing, to then experimenting with that a little bit, right? With the burlesques things that started to come on. And And eventually those became like, the private men's clubs, right? Like women didn't go with the men to those experiences. It became a men's thing only, where I feel like at one point all of those experiences were shared. They're starting to do more of that now. Like, there's shows out there now that you can go see, and it's part of a date night experience to go see a beautiful burlesque show where it's meant to tantalize you and bring out the passions inside of you in a tasteful manner for some, right? Because of the way that they play with the pinup concept and lingerie and things like that. Um, but I think that it was a gradual thing that just started to trickle, and one thing became inappropriate, and then another, and then another. And I mean, similar to where we are in society, of all of these labeling of this, that, then, or the other thing that we have going on. Now everyone wants to be in some sort of a category, right? Or no category at all, with the non people that don't categorize me at all, because there's too many categories and it's very confusing. So I think that it happened slowly, right? Because first we had the gays, then the lesbians, then they continue to add letters. In a very similar way, that's kind of how sexuality started to get closed off. We can start with the one that has the biggest account in history that we know of, which is Christianity, creating this patriarchy and causing, this idea of sexuality being something shameful, something that has to be that's taboo almost, and wrong in a sort of way. And we can take that all the way back to what they did to Mary Magdalene in the Bible, where instead of her being the high priestess that actually through the sexual rituals woke Jesus up to his gifts, or we can believe that she was the prostitute that he saved, and that she was this awful, human being. Um, it depends which perspective you want to buy into. And the old one has this very way of placing women in a certain category. You are either the housewife and the mother, or you are the prostitute. Like, there again, no gray. All the grayness was taken out of sexuality. All of the fluidity that it's supposed to have was removed. And so we've, as a society, we have forgotten its true purpose, and it's very difficult now to even take it back there, because then it can mean something so different to so many people. So calling sexuality sacred almost does take it back to the way that Catholicism placed it. And no, because that doesn't mean sacred simply because you're having it behind closed doors.
Right, right. Yeah, and people tend to use the word sacred almost almost in a way of like, instead of then showing it off, right? It's meant to be like,
Private.
yeah, put into this box. And I agree with you. Um that this idea of like, how much I guess I put it down into a function of like, when patriarchy started is when like sensuality, sexuality, and all things that were like deemed more like feminine got pushed into this like, you know this taboo container, and in all of its various forms. And when that happened, I think really depends on when patriarchy became heavily prevalent within each society, during each era. You see it, I feel like you see it happen through every culture. There are very few matriarchal cultures left on the planet, but so many of the ancient civilizations did have um, a lot of reverence for the goddess and for all of the ascended masters that are female, or have female archetype. And so it saddens me truly, because I am of the same mind that all of these things, while yes they are sacred, I look at sacredness so differently than so many other people. When I say that about something, it's meant to be uplifted, it's meant to be shown to the world. I don't feel ashamed to talk about any of the things that we're talking about. And I know that some people are going to come into this conversation and they're going to immediately go, oh, no, 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 like, I can't talk about that. We can't talk about that. I can't listen to that. Or they're gonna, listen to it almost shamefully, with headphones in, to make sure that none of their, kids come in, or that their, spouse doesn't come in, or their significant other doesn't come in and think, what are they watching? I kind of think about how people react to watching movies or watching TV, even in the privacy of their own home, which I find fascinating. How many times have you heard of people saying, I was watching Game of Thrones, and then like my partner walks in, and it happened to be during like a sex scene, and I immediately was like, oh, it's not like that. Like trying to justify their, like, what they were watching. Or I think of like 50 Shades of Grey, or even to some extent things like Twilight, all of like the fantasy things where people were like, oh, no, 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 like, it's okay, it's not like that, trying to justify. And I just think that's so sad, because you shouldn't have to justify a very natural thing. We are, like you said in the beginning, we are here to experience and to enjoy and to embrace all of our passions, and not just what we are passionate about, but what gives us passion, right? Bringing out our own passions. And if we're not doing that, we are missing a very essential, critical piece. And it is sacred. It's sacred, and therefore should be uplifted and expressed. And some people may think, well, but actions have consequences, which I'm a firm believer of, absolutely. And yet I think some people go, well, because actions have consequences, the consequences of this are this way, right? Woman dresses sexy, therefore when she goes out, she gets sexually assaulted. That's a consequence. And therefore, if you don't want that consequence, you shouldn't dress sexy. And do you feel like that's the appropriate way to take, like the appropriate line of thinking, or is there a different option we could go with?
So here's the challenge. For some women, it's not. But for some women, it is. Because discernment plays such a huge role in the decisions that each woman will make. You might wear the sexy dress, but you're not going to walk into that alley by yourself where someone else is like, no, be fine. You understand? So we can't play that game with everyone, because it's not the same for everyone. I cannot put a veil and be like, oh no, everyone dress however you want, and you're not, and if you, as long as you tell yourself that that's not going to be a consequence for you, then it won't. Because you also have to really factor in someone's ability to make smart choices and make smart decisions and not put themselves in dangerous situations when they are dressed a certain way, right? Because then there will be consequences, right? Or there could be consequences. Like, I do feel that people have to have street smarts, because not everyone is in the light. And as much as we protect ourselves with the light, we cannot pretend the dark isn't there either. That is part of the balance of the 3D matrix that we live in. So while I say, you go girl, be as sexy as you want to be, you also have to be fucking careful and not stupid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear that. I do. And I feel like whenever I like speak on this, I always end up going with the wear what you want, but understand that you also need to like wear what you want, don't be ashamed, but also make the choice to like have a buddy that you trust, right? And if you're a mother of sons, like the other piece of the coin is don't place it all on your girl, right? If you're say you're a mother or father of a daughter and a son, don't put all of it on the girl to make sure that she's dressing safely, because what is safe, right? Like you were just saying, just so a dress for one girl is not going to be the same as a dress for another girl, right? But also like a girl could easily, right? This is something else we'll have to get into, is that like sexuality and sensuality is more than just what you wear. So a girl who is wearing a dress that doesn't show cleavage and doesn't like necessarily like cling, right, could be considered the sexiest girl in the room, and she's not showing anything, right? I mean, I feel like we have whole cultures that embrace that understanding that the sexiness of a person does not come through based off of what you are wearing. I think of the geisha culture in Japan, that where like the inside of the wrist is considered sexy, and yet like I look at their kimonos and go, that is damn sexy. Like, are you kidding? And they're like fully covered, for the most part, right? But to also then say, we're also going to teach our sons that it's not okay. It's not okay to just go with what they're considering animal instinct, right? And saying, oh, I like what I see, therefore I get to have.
Right.
That's not okay, right? No. So we're not going to just put everything on our girls to shut themselves down and close themselves off, right, in our society. But we're also going to teach our boys to keep their hands to themselves until consent is obtained, right?
Yeah, no, I think that is part of the biggest piece, is how we change a society is how we raise our children about these things. And it requires a lot of conversations around how men and women interact with each other, because we've had this whole conversation about female empowerment and all of these things, but I talk to my husband about this all the time. The men are also trying to figure out their role in all of this, because they also were programmed to see things a certain way and behave a certain way and follow a certain set of rules. And the men haven't had any sort of come to Jesus moment, right? Where they're all like, okay, so this is how, as a society, we as men, we can continue to grow and have better symbiotic relationships with our female counterparts. Like that hasn't happened, right? Like they're just kind of ducking their head and going, okay, women's movement, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it saddens me because like the patriarchy and the way that this has affected sexuality has affected them just as much as it has affected us as women. And that's so sad. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. And
but I think men right now, they don't know what to do. They're like, do I hold the door? No, because I'm not supposed to. Do I offer to pay for lunch? No, because she can pay for herself. Like, can I ask her out to lunch? No, because it's inappropriate at the work office. Like, they don't know what to do with themselves. Like,
which I think it's so crazy, because I think so many people in my life, because there are a lot of family members of mine that are more conservative, right? They prefer to keep sex behind closed doors. They're very ashamed to talk about it. They feel like that's where it belongs. And I say, I'm not going to yuck your yum. Like if that's what you want and that's what feels true to you, then 100%. But also I ask that, because I respect what you feel, I hope that you'll respect what I feel. And I don't feel that way. I feel like we should be able to have conversations like what you and I are having. And even more so in being able to not have to, hedge around certain words, like I don't want to hide the word masturbation. I don't want to have to hide the word, sex or different forms of sex. Right? Like that's part of the problem. And that's part of why our sex ed is 100% like, here's the sperm, here's the egg, here's how a baby is made.
Oh,
And that's where we stop. And oh, and by the way, like if you don't want to have a baby, condoms or abstinence. And I'm thinking, oh my God, like, what are you doing? Like, what are we as a society doing that we're just perpetuating this cycle? If it in my mind, knowledge is power. So if you at the very least understand how not only how things work, but how to apply it to yourself, right? Getting a more holistic view. If you then choose that you want to keep your personal practices behind closed doors because that is what suits you and that is what makes you feel whole and empowered and all of the things, amen to you. Yes, let's do it. Get it on. But if it doesn't suit you and if makes you feel hindered and blocked, I want to release the sacral. Like, let's just get all that energy out in the open. As much as you are comfortable. And that is where I love how you said that it's on a spectrum, that it is, there is shades of gray. And there are people out there that are doing the work to get it out there, to make this education more comprehensive. Have you gone to anything specific to like kind of understand yourself more, yourself within your own body, yourself within your relationship?
I'm so glad you brought that up because I wanted to talk about our understanding of sexuality and getting an orgasm and how there's so many more ways than just simply penetration or using a vibrator or all of these things. And so I'm so glad you asked me that because I didn't go somewhere. I watched that show. I think it was called Unwell on Netflix.
Okay.
So sorry, Goop, but we're going to talk about one other thing.
Cristina and I both love Gwyneth Paltrow too, and
Yes.
we've been, like I said, we've been deep diving into this and this concept, and so there's so much, but yes,
Yeah.
Unwell.
So, and there was an episode with Sasha Cobra. And Sasha Cobra hosts retreats in Mexico, I feel like. And at these retreats, through breath work, you are able to climax. And she does, the meditation and walks you through the breathwork exercise and helps you, reach that level. And I followed her on Instagram because I thought that was so powerful and interesting. And right around after we graduated from Soul Teacher, she offered some free Zoom sessions, and I was able to sign up for one of them. And it was incredible. Like my whole body vibrated, like all of me. Like, when you get the tingles in your fingers because your hands fall asleep because you left them on something or a book or whatever, or your foot falls asleep from a weird position. Okay, but imagine that running up and down your body. And it's all from this breath exercise and the mantra that she was having us focus on, and that we were sending the breath to we were focused on sending the breath to our clitoris, to our vagina, to those parts that we wanted to activate. And when you focused on that, it created this energetic vibration in the body that allowed this, I mean, tantric, erotic experience, but not in the way I was fully dressed. I was fully clothed through this experience, guys. Like I wasn't naked. And Goop gets into this at one point with one of the people that was charging the energy around the body, and he was kind of just working with the energies, and she was focusing her breath. Her breath was going down there and helping, as he was just connecting to that energy that she was creating, right?
Mhm.
And that's how she reached, I think that was in the second or third episode, I can't remember,
Yeah.
but it was a beautiful experience. And she was fully clothed, and so was he, and he didn't touch her.
Yeah, I think if I'm, so what we're talking about now, guys, and I'll put links to all of these things down below too, of where you can watch these and these names. We're talking about an episode within Sex Loving Goop that Gwyneth Paltrow's company Goop that does a deep dive into sex and connection and all that. And Miss Jaya, who I am a huge fan of. I'm going to put her links down below too. I would love to have her on at some point. That would be awesome. Shout out. Make that happen, universe. Manifesting realities here, guys.
She's incredible.
She's incredible.
My husband and I did her blueprint thing.
Yes, so did I. And we'll talk about that next. So I think in that episode, the only time that her partner Ian touches her is to ground right in the beginning. And he like applied some gentle but firm pressure to her pelvis, and then just moved his hands out and connected with that energy. And this is something that you and I know very well, because this is how we work, right? Like not in like not with our clients in the like sensual aspect of it, but like we play in that energetic field, whether it be for distance, when we do our healings, or you for your Reiki sessions. But it's the same field of energy that we're working with.
Yeah.
And I find that so fascinating. I loved that episode. I loved watching that because it showed how far your energy is connected to you in totality. And it was beautiful to watch her be able to connect, and to watch him be able to have that connection, because he felt it too. And he had his moment as well during that. And I loved that so much.
It was beautiful. And I had a very similar experience when I did this breathwork exercise with Sasha Cobra. I find that breathwork is so powerful that I've really incorporated it into my Reiki work before I get started, because it really grounds you into the body and helps you connect to the present moment, because you have to focus on it so much to get it right, to do the steps that you're supposed to be doing, that it's such an important aspect. And I really feel like the breath is a gift to us to come back to this very moment, because it really, I always know when I'm holding my breath, because I either went back or forward in my head. I wasn't here,
Yes.
And that happens to me a lot in kickboxing, because I'm thinking about something else, and the trainer will come around and be like, doing it great, but can you breathe? I'm like, right, come back. And it's so true that we don't catch ourselves doing that. It's something so simple but so sacred for our practices, to really bring people to the moment. And that very simple act can bring us pleasure.
Yes.
If we allow it, if we invite it to, if we set the intention to connect with it in that intimate way, it will help us transcend. And my understanding of some of the things that we've lost, and I feel like one of the last episodes, the one that talked about the past life healings that they talked about. And
the celestial circles.
Yes, the celestial circles. That's right. So what I've really connected to is that we've lost some of the very basic purposes of the orgasm, which
Mm,
was really to open our third eye, which
yeah.
was really to connect us to our divinity and show us through that energetic vibration that comes through our body, that this kundalini effect that creates that orgasmic feeling that is erotic and pleasure all in this one, moment, right? For the man when he has his ejaculation, and for the woman when she fully embraces her sexuality for
Mhm.
that brief moment, right? Because we women have it a little bit harder than the men, right? You rub the men the right way and they're fine, but us women really have to get into the mental game to get in there.
Oh gosh, the like bane of all the female like
But
existence.
I'll tell you what, ladies, what you haven't realized is that when you've healed that sacral chakra to the point, because I ain't gonna pretend that mine's perfectly healed. But when you've healed
Same
it,
boat.
yeah, but when you've healed it to the point where you've opened yourself to up to the idea that your sexuality isn't shameful, that it is a beautiful act, that you are meant to have this pleasure,
Mm,
your body allows you to experience it in a way that your vibrator cannot do if you don't connect to that moment, if you don't
yes.
fully get into the present and connect with your breath and really get in there. You can spend the entire time orgasming, girls, the
Yes.
whole time.
Yes. You bring up
He
such
could
a
take as
great
long as
point.
he wants. You're gonna be happy the whole time.
You bring up such a great point about being connected with yourself and understanding that, you know, doing that inner work to heal that piece of us, right? Heal our hearts, heal our sacral, and coming to a place of like what I would almost consider a natural attunement, right? To ourselves and to source that this we're here. I'm one of the okay, number one, I'm going to backtrack a little bit because you mentioned like breath being like sacred and being able to bring you back to your present. And you just so beautifully articulated like why my company is called Breath of Life. Like, because it seriously like that is the whole goal. It doesn't matter what service or what offering you want to get from Breath of Life, they all come back to this place of you come back to your present, and you do that through breath, you do that through coming to yourself. um and it is so true in every aspect, but I feel like within sexuality, within our own pleasure, whether it's personal pleasure or in a partnership, presence is so essential. And I think that's why so many women have such a hard time being in being in a sexual situation with anyone, because
Well,
they're always thinking about the past or the present, right? They're always thinking about, well, the last time I had sex, it wasn't good for this person, and I need to try to make it good for this. And so they're then trying to project like, how do I need to be, instead of being like, no, I'm going to focus on my pleasure right now. I'm going to command, this moment, right, for myself, not for them. I'm going to take responsibility for my own orgasm and my own pleasure and create it, right? The fact that somebody else is there is like just a bonus, right? It's a bonus because you get to experience true connection. And I feel like when you can bring yourself to yourself, right, and have that experience that you're talking about, you then are truly connecting with your partner in that situation because you've never been more present.
right, right, yeah, and I think that a lot of it goes back to our culture around it, right? Like a lot of women are in their heads having sex. Like, how do I look right now? Does my body look right? This is an awkward position. I'm looking strange. Like, and you're not fully engaged in what's going on. I mean, I can tell you from my own experience, like when I first got married, like I didn't want to have sex if I had pimples on my face. Like, no, I don't. We're gonna be really close, and he's gonna see them all. So no. Yeah,
Christina. You're speaking to so many women right now. Like you just triggered so many. They're like, oh my God, that's me.
sure, sure. I know because I experienced it, and I think back, and I was like, that was so fucking stupid. He could have given a shit.
Right, like, and that is the thing, right? Like how I've heard so many times, and I've said it myself, like, dude, they're getting naked, like they don't care if you what you look like, they don't care if you've got, hairy legs, hairy armpits. I mean, they may care if you smell, but depending,
Some like it.
some like it, yeah, like,
Yeah.
and this is
They say it's pheromones.
right.
I don't like. Let me rinse off, please.
And you know what, it's interesting too, because so many people look at that from the perspective of like that the man doesn't care, and like I would even the submit that on some level a lot of women don't care either, right? Like we have sex with hairy men all the time. Like globally, there are a lot of women having sex with hairy men, and there are a lot of women having sex with men who just got off of work and haven't showered, and like even we on some level are very similar, and maybe for different reasons, but like we're very similar in that it doesn't really matter, and that I think is like so prevalent, especially when we think about like you know more women have sex with men who don't have six packs, or more women have sex with women who aren't the like Victoria's Secret model. And we I think that's something that women too pride themselves on. At least I know that I do. That I pride myself on the package, the outer package doesn't hold as much for me as the connection that I have with a person. And so I don't really care. Now, is it nice? Is it like a bonus if you happen to, have abs, male or female? Sure. Sure. But like at the end of the day, though, I mean, and as an old married lady, I'm sure
As
you
an
can
old
speak to
married
this.
lady, I definitely can say that in my 20s, I explored all areas, and it didn't necessarily make a difference for me at that time because I didn't understand my own sexuality well enough to even enjoy the times when I was with that hot man with the six pack, right? Because I was too worried about how I was looking in that situation, So yeah,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
it really is more about how comfortable the other person makes you feel in your skin so that you can have that beautiful connection, because sex is actually meant to be healing. Like you're supposed to release that energy that you need to let go of, right? And the part of the problem is that we make it such a shameful act, or we've made it such a shameful act that we don't allow ourselves to reach the point where it heals us. It can heal you when you have that orgasmic experience that causes your heart rate to go up and sweat and all of the things, and you are meant to open your third eye so that you can make this not just the physical connection with your partner, but all the other connections, because you're so intimately close to this person that it's meant to build this beautiful telepathic connection almost, right? And that's healing. That's a healing modality that we haven't even begun to really go back to all of the things that it's capable of doing for us, aside from, the what we physically see. It does more for our energy. It transcends us when we do it in this ritualistic way that is meant to build your connection of this one consciousness that we're trying to comprehend. It comes from a place of coming back to your presence and realizing that this is a natural and sacred experience, right?
Mm.
And the animalistic part was hyped up, unfortunately. The wrong side of it was hyped up and made
Yeah.
out to be something else. And we got the shit end of the story, guys. We left out the really good parts of the story is what happened.
Yes.
And it's too bad because this other side, this other part of the story, that's where the magic happens. That's where both people can reach this beautifully orgasmic tantric space where you're having a lovely time for as long as you choose, right? It doesn't have to be 2 seconds and it doesn't have to be 5 hours. It's whatever you want, you know?
Exactly. Yes. So you mentioned that, in your younger years that you had younger as in like child, teenager, young adult. She's not old, guys. I'm sorry. She's not old. We joke about this, but that you didn't understand yourself in this way, in your sexuality or sensuality. Do you feel like you better understand that part of yourself now?
I think I've just begun to understand part of that now. I've probably just tipped the iceberg, right? Like I've just probably chipped off a little piece and going, oh, let's dig in there a little further because it's an abyss, Abigail.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say I've just started to understand and unravel um, the web here that we've created about sexuality, and that we've just begun to understand that when you have these experiences in with the intention to connect, with the intention to be present, with the intention to connect with yourself also in a way that you are connecting with your energy both physically and spiritually, right? um and more people experience that, we will learn more about the benefits of doing sexual rituals like this that we just don't know enough about just yet. And I feel like they touched on it with that with going back to that celestial healing that they did in
Oh,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm trying to remember. As we're talking about this, I'm trying to remember the exact name for it. Constellation. I feel like it's constellation something. We'll put, once again, I'm gonna link all of these things because they're just such great resources. But I'll give a little background because I feel like you're looking it up. It's where you have a group of people who don't know you. You have a person who's like hosting and kind of like working the whole like scene. And then you have a person who wants to heal something within their family lineage. And the like, I don't know, host is the wrong word. The facilitator tells the person very quietly, choose one of these people that you don't know to project your mother, for example, on your mother or your grandmother on your mother's side. And the individual who's looking to heal something goes, picks one of these people, and it could be male or female, stands behind them and basically like lays hands and just projects into them all of their thoughts and feelings about this person. It takes literally about 30 seconds. And then this projector basically gives what they're like thinking or feeling about from what they just received. And it's so bloody interesting. It's fascinating. Number
Yeah.
one, it's literally our work in action. I think it's just so brilliant. And it's such a wonderful way to heal because you get to see it in real time. And so much of what we do is held within our minds, held within our third eye. And this is where you really get to see with your own eyes how quickly this energy transfer works and how healing it is.
Yeah, it's incredible. And really, a lot of the times we feel a certain way about our sexuality, about our womb space, about our sacral chakra, and we don't know where it comes from. And sometimes it's because it didn't happen in this life. And so that that lineage thing that can be passed down through, because we're all connected, folks, like this one consciousness, it's
We're
not
all
an idea,
one.
it's we're all connected. So this idea of these past like healing those things within ourselves really does change us energetically, because we can let go of something that really just didn't belong to us.
Mhm.
It was from an ancestor or an aunt or an uncle, or we're all mixed bags. So
Yes.
yeah, and I thought that was really incredible, because you ask how this all started, and I mean, this can go back so far, because we've existed for so long that you know how it all started could have been from certain bad experiences that didn't even happen in this life, but created this veil over sexuality. And that's why this domino effect, and here we are.
Yes.
It's so many layers of things that have happened to generations of people that have been oppressed or suppressed or hung or
Yep.
burned you know,
Yep.
alive for these rituals, because another group of people came along and saw it and didn't understand it and thought it was wrong. And there went that tradition. And so
Mhm.
these things have happened for centuries, right? Really. And that's how we have such a little understanding of, aside from making babies, why we have so many, because there's so many. Like, I can't remember, but they do say it at the beginning, like how many nerve endings you have.
Oh
It's
yeah, it's like in the millions.
it's in the, like,
Yeah. Yeah. We have
we are
more
perfectly
nerve
designed.
endings
Yeah.
in our clitoris as females than males do in their penis. It's insane. And I love it so much. It's just like, in my
Yeah.
mind, one more reason for like just how fabulous the human body is. Uh, so that really brings us, I think, I feel like to make this like full circle, we've talked about now like everything from our childhood and like where we started, where we're getting to in our adulthood, taking it, finding the line back to our, ancestors and our lineage and where that's coming from, and these thoughts and ideas that we've basically brought through with us. Where do you think that we're going? Where do you think you're going as this spiritual kick-ass being in this human experience with your sexuality, with your sensuality? Do you have a good outlook on it? Is this something that excites you? I feel like it does, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, yes. So so I definitely feel that the coming generations are really going to look at sexuality differently than we have, because we are opening up these conversations a bit more with our children, I hope. As a parent, mine are still rather small, but like and it's funny, because I feel like to a certain extent it's nature also versus nurture, because like we don't really say anything to my youngest about what she's doing with the seatbelt, but like we'll turn around and look at her and be like, what you up to? And she's like, turn around. Like, she actually tells us to turn around, which is hilarious, because it's like, what makes you want mommy to turn around? And so I'll laugh and
Right.
be like, why do
Yeah.
you want mommy to turn around? And she's like, I don't know, just don't look at me.
Yeah. It's cute, and yet I like a small piece of me like it's just like, where did you pick it up? Like, where did you pick up that like this is something that was shameful, this is something that you needed to keep hidden? And maybe like I think some parents would be like, time and place, right? And like teaching like you can't, in our 3D world today, like you can't be an exhibitionist. You do get, hauled away and put into a jail cell for 24 hours or whatever it is. Like there are, there's that. But I also feel like I also feel like there are spaces, right? There are, I mean, we have nudist beaches, not that, people like are going just to have like sex in the nude on beaches, but like this concept of like there are spaces in our world where we can have these experiences and we can when we feel pleasure, when we want to experience pleasure, we can do so without feeling shame. And like I lived in a household where sex wasn't like talked about necessarily, but we weren't denied. So like, it didn't seem weird to me that like if I wanted to go into my bedroom and like pleasure myself as a teenager, like that wasn't something that was frowned upon. It wasn't something that I was like, I came back out after finishing and like I was given the ninth degree. It was it was more just a like, you're doing something healthy for yourself. you know Obviously if those practices led to something that threatened my physical body, then that would have been talked about, that would have been discussed. But I always felt safe that I could explore myself and not be punished for that. And I think that there are so many generations where, even I think of young boys who are told like, don't masturbate, you'll go blind. What the shit? Like,
No.
no, you won't.
Yeah.
You
No,
know?
or they're mocked about it, or
Yeah.
they're shamed about it. And the boy needs to do that. His hormones, are raging. That's why they
Mhm.
rage. Like, cuz
Yeah.
and so I think that as a society, we just need to get comfortable having these conversations with our young about their sexuality and how they're feeling, especially when they get into the hormonal years. I did not grow up in a family where we talked about those things at all, like ever. So,
Do you think that you and your husband will make it like a concerted effort when your kids are a little older? Because right now, like you said, they're very young. They
yeah,
all under
um,
the ages of 8, yes.
yeah, yeah.
So
So Celine soon-ish, because I already had to have the conversation with her about the menstrual cycle because someone did already have it in one of her classes, because since she is the youngest, there's already 9-year-olds, and those are the early ones, right? But there's
Mhm.
already 9-year-olds. So yeah. So yeah, for sure. I will 100% have I don't know if my husband will, because he's still very conservative about those things. So, but I will. I definitely will, because they need to know that they can come and talk to me about those things, and they need to know that it's normal and that all little kids are going through it too.
Yeah.
Because the more we normalize it at home, the easier it is for the next generation to feel less shame about their sexuality. It starts with getting rid of it. Like we've talked about this about any topic. Like you don't want your kids to fall into the guilt and shame pattern in the life that you've had. You've got to heal it so that you don't pass it down, because
Yes.
unconsciously you're going to do it, right? If you don't consciously make an effort to change it. So
Mhm.
we, as the parents of this next generation, have to consciously make the effort to change the language around sexuality with our kids.
Mhm.
That's how it changes. That's how we
Yes.
turn the wheel.
Yeah, absolutely. And it allows for better experiences to be had. I fully believe that. I fully believe that because I was able to have that freedom and that safety and that opportunity to explore myself and to figure out what it is that I like, my first experience was a good one. And I don't have that same story that so many other women have of like my first time hurt, or my first time wasn't good, or whatever. Like mine wasn't that way. Now granted, my first time was when I was much older, which is also an odd story to have. But I feel like if more parents embraced this idea and could let go of a little bit of their shame to help their children have a little less shame around this topic, and did a more comprehensive sex ed, and that included this idea of, figuring out what it is that gives you pleasure in discovering yourself, right? Then first times for both boys and girls are going to be vastly different. And we're probably going to see that those first times don't happen when you're 13, 14, 15, 16, or at prom, when you're still babies, right? And you shouldn't need to be worrying about that, because why are you worrying about what somebody else feels when you don't even know what you feel? So if we could,
The worst time. Like you
the
have
worst
no
time.
idea. You have no idea who you are at that phase because the hormones are literally making you crazy, right? Because it's so many of them and it's so much, and your body, your physical body is going through so many changes that it's potentially the worst time for you to be experiencing having sex, even though, like, the body at that point, is meant to have babies, right? Like if we were going by our perfect design, right? Like the younger that we have babies, the more that we can spit them out because a younger body's physically better, right? For that, if we go into the science conversation, for those of you that are into
Right.
science, I totally understand that perspective. But mentally, to rear those kids, that's the reason that back then, when we were spitting out 100 kids, it took a village because the village people raised those kids, not
Mhm.
that little girl that was having all the kids because she was still a little girl.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And there's just such a different mentality too. I think one of the things that evolution seemed to like miss out on is what happens when a society progresses to such a point where you don't need to worry about your survival. I mean, part of the reason why so many girls have start their period, which means that they're, able to have babies, um, so early, is because you died early, right? You died before you were 30. So if you weren't having children by the time you were 13, 14, 15, you probably weren't going to have them, and you weren't going to be able to pass on your lineage. And I think that that's something that people like don't necessarily like connect. Like we're not connecting these multiple facets, right? The scientific evolutionary aspect, the personal physical connection, and the energetic, right? That mind body spirit connection, right? If we're not connecting all of these lines of inquiry into the whole and say, this is what makes up sexuality, this is what makes up the human body, this is what makes up our experience within our life, then you're going to be missing something. And
Yeah.
I think that's why it's so fascinating that we're having this conversation, right? And we're able to say we're doing this deep dive into ourselves, for ourselves, but also so that we can teach, also so that we can pass on, also so
Yeah.
that we can help do this healing work.
One of the things that the last episode brought up, and I really wish that they had dove into this a little bit more because I find it to be one of the biggest issues for long haul couples, right? Is they don't tell each other what they would like to experience in the bedroom.
Yes.
And I can tell you that it has taken me a very long time to even start to feel comfortable. And why? I don't know, this whole ideal of the pinup girl. Like, he's supposed to know what I want. Like, I
Mhm.
don't know, this romantic, weird thing that you're taught from the media and television and romance that, you know, they don't speak. Like, you're not talking, you're just kissing and being sensual and all these things. Like, no, there's actually a lot of laughter that has to go on because it's
Mhm.
also a release, and there might be some tears in there because that's another release. Like, sexuality is messy and it's a whole experience of all the emotions sometimes, right? Sometimes it's
Yes.
mostly laughter, and sometimes it's a little bit of laughter with some tears, because when you're really in the moment and allowing yourself, there's a lot that is going through you. You're having a whole experience.
Yes.
So, and I think that that's not enough discussed, how very uncomfortable couples feel talking about what they'd like to do, or what pleases them,
Yeah.
potentially because they don't know. So we can start
Hmm.
there. Like sometimes it's that you really don't know, because you haven't experimented enough, because you feel it's shameful and all the things that we have discussed before. But say you had a clean slate, and you felt comfortable with the person, and you could tell them what you wanted. How many of us know what we want? Like we
Exactly.
have this idea, this fantasy, whatever, that sometimes comes up in our head, but like, if I were actually to act that out, is that going to bring me pleasure?
Yes. That was brought up so beautifully with the beautiful African American couple that was working with Jaya in Sex, Love, and Goop, where the man's blueprint. So, this is something that I'll link down below, guys. I highly encourage everybody to go and take this test. You can do a free version, which is like 10 questions. You can do a paid version, which is like $17, I think, 17, $20, super cheap. That has like 20 questions, and it gives you like a full breakdown of your type of pleasure. And when they did it originally, the gentleman in this couple was found to be like the sexual type. So there are like 4 or 5 different types. They all like range from like kinky and sexual, sensual, energetic, then a mixture, a shapeshifter. And it categorizes you to what you find, what is like your more, what's your highest percentage of each one of these or whatever. And your highest percentage is what you are thought to be known as. Well, this gentleman scored highest in sexual, which is like just the like down and dirty, like get it in, and it turns out that what actually gave him the most pleasure was a more sensual experience, which is more about your energy and more about pleasurable touch and more about a connection that far exceeds just a penis and a vagina. And I found that so like fascinating. It so speaks to what you're talking about of like run it through. Like, do you even know yourself well enough to be able to tell your partner, this is what I want. I don't want you to touch me so hard. I want you to like soften it up, and not being so aggressive or being so like no foreplay. Like it just makes me giggle. It gives me the best feeling in the world that there are more men out there who enjoy foreplay than there are that don't, and that like need it. It's just like the movies and books were so wrong. And I think
Oh my God.
what you're saying about the communication piece, whenever I have clients who are talking to me about relationship, that is the one thing that I continuously tell people. It's on a loop. How often are you talking? How often are you talking? Are you saying, I like that? Yes. Touch me here. Yes. They're like, no,
It's silence. It's
no.
just breathing. Yes.
One
Yeah.
of these days, they need to make a movie or a TV show that actually shows what sex should be, not what, not this ideal version of what they hope it's.
Yeah. Yeah. And it comes with, they've removed the play out of the sexual act, and it is meant to be playful, right? Like you are supposed to feel comfortable enough to experiment and figure out what it is that you like, but you have to get to a comfortable place in your own body to allow yourself to get curious and experiment with your partner and feel comfortable enough with your partner, or do it by yourself first,
Right.
like whatever floats your boat. Like when I was going to do the Sasha thing, I had wanted my husband to do it with me. And, we were going to send the kids to grandma's house so that they wouldn't hear us making weird breathing noises for an hour and a half. They ended up switching the dates and it was during the
Mm.
week. And so the universe was like, no, bitch, you're going to do this first and then you're going to talk to him about it. And honestly, I'm glad that that was the case because she tends to have a very dry sense of humor. And so at the beginning or like midway before she starts the meditation, she was like, so is everybody ready to get naked? And I swear to you, 50 people got off. And she was
Oh my
totally messing
God.
around. She was like, okay, lots of people dropped out. Ha ha.
Oh my goodness. I'm definitely gonna have to check this woman out. I feel like her and I are like kindred spirits because
Yeah.
it's
So,
such a
but
beautiful
but if
experience.
but had my husband been on there, he would have been like, turn that off. He would have been the first one, like leaving the conversation. He would have been like, no.
Oh goodness.
So, that's why the universe did it that way, right? Like, I get it. I'm
Mhm.
like, all right, so kind of, find your flow in all of this is what I highly recommend if you take anything away from this conversation is like, yes, it is going to be a little awkward the first couple of times that you try to do this, especially if you've been with someone for a long time and it's been crickets when you're having sex, but start with like one or two things. Maybe even have the conversation before you have sex. Like watch the show, because I did with my husband, watch the show Goop with your
Yes.
husband, and then you can just make comments about what they were talking about and be like, oh, yeah, we should try something like that. Or
Right.
no, I don't think I want to do that. Or whatever, Like that way it's less awkward because you're not in the bedroom just yet. Like whatever works, wherever your comfort level is, like
Yes.
remember that he we're not, as humans, we're not there yet as far as having telepathic communications with our partners. We'd love to someday be there, but the movies are making it up. We're not there yet. And
Yes.
you need to tell them what you want and what you don't want, because even if you're energetically there and the chemistry's there and all of the things, they're not mind readers. And
Yes.
everyone has very specific ways of enjoying things, and your partner's not going to know unless you tell them, and you're not
Yes.
going to know unless you experiment and figure it out.
Yes. Yeah. And for women out there, don't just assume that if you're with anybody, right? If you're with a man that they just only need penetration in order for that to like be the thing. That putting that on them is just not fair. And if you're with a woman, then really making a concerted effort to start that dialogue and not kind of perpetuating the cycle of like stereotypes and all of that. And if you are a non-binary couple, you know what, once again, I think communication, we just have to really understand ourselves. We really have to go through that communication process. And if you need a little help, if you need a little help in understanding or doing some healing, Cristina and I are here for you. This is some of our favorite work, is to, get into people's energy and really figure out like where your blocks are, and breaking those ancestral chains that are really keeping you down and keeping you from fully embracing your full self. So, take advantage of all of the things. And we're going to be putting all of these links and stuff down below so that you can have full access to all of these things that we're talking about, whether it be the shows, the people, the blueprints. We really just want this conversation and others like this to become so much more normalized and had and expressed, and to truly get back to sacred sexuality and sacred sensuality and really enjoying pleasure. So, Cristina, thank you so much for joining me today on this really insane conversation. Where can people find you?
I'm Christy Happy Place, and that's Christy Cristy Happy Place. And you can find me on Instagram. You can also find me on Etsy, the same place. And I also have a link on Calendly, and it's also Christy Happy Place. So
We will put all of those links down below. I am so, so grateful to you. I love you so much. Thank you for
thank
being here
you.
with me.
Thank you. This was a beautiful conversation, and I hope that it opens other people up to have more of these conversations, especially moms and dads with young kids.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us again for another Breath of Life's conversation. I can't tell you how happy I am to be back with you for this new year, the second season. We are going to be having so many more brilliant conversations for you. Keep a lookout for all of the things. If you are interested in following me, booking a session with me or Chrissy, like I said, all of the links are going to be down below, but you can certainly find me on Instagram. It's where I'm most active. Of course, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe and send to all of your friends. I am just so excited to work with each and every one of you and for us to continue to spread the good word and all of the things. So thank you once again for joining us, and we will see you next time for the next Breath of Life conversations. Bye.
Bye.